Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Okay, so I have to tell you, in 7.5 years of making videos on YouTube, I have never been more nervous to make a video than I am today. And the information that I'm going to share on here today, I don't know why, I've been very nervous to put this out for a while. In the last year, I've actually thought a lot about sharing this information online and things like that. But right before I do, I always get kind of nervous, a little scared, and maybe you shouldn't share this information, maybe you shouldn't talk about it, maybe it doesn't need to be out there. And what I'm talking about is the Baumeister case. And his killing gay men in Indiana in the late 80s and the early 90s. I have done 2 previous videos recently on this where I explained my history of my personal interest in this case, being that at the time that he was killing gay men in Indianapolis, I fit the demographic of who he was picking. I got sober shortly after the killings were happening on a pretty regular basis, and then my sobriety date is December 17th of 1994, and then shortly after that was when Baumeister died, the killing stopped, and the case, basically the investigation, the case slowly closed. It is my understanding that this is a closed case today. That being said, they are still trying to identify the victims that they found their remains at Fox Hollow Farms, which was the mansion that Baumeister lived in with his wife and his 2 children. I've thought a lot about how I want to do this video, but being nervous about it and being afraid, I was watching last night, I was finishing the last part of the documentary. It's a 6-part series called The Disappearance of Crystal Rogers, which is one of the cases I'm going to cover over here. And a lot of people in Bardstown, Kentucky were not talking because they were afraid of the story coming from them. And, in many of these true crime documentaries that I watch, or many of the books that I read, true crime books that I read, that's a common thing in the story, is that a lot of information never comes out. The victims are never identified, missing people are never found, and the truth never comes out because people are afraid to talk. I think it's important that this information comes out. I will say this, that this information has been taken to the authorities. It has also been taken to investigators that have been working on this case for a very long time. As of today, 2024, they are still identifying victims. And actually, if you Google search Baumeister, what will come up is that they are still trying to identify victims from the 10,000 remains that they have found at Fox Hollow Farms, his estate that he lived on in the woods. Just last year, I think it was in October or November of last year, they identified one of the victims that had been missing for 30 years, Alan Livingston, and were able to bring him home to his family. I think it's really important to continue to talk about this story. I think the fact that this is a cold case that not a lot of people are talking about anymore, and that it's basically a closed cold case or closed case that people aren't talking about anymore, that people think that they have the right person. And the fact is that I believe there's a lot more to the story, and I shared that in my last 2 videos. I'm not going to get into the long history of that today, so if you want to know more about that, please go watch my 2 previous videos. But just to give kind of a quick background story, Baumeister was a serial killer in the late 80s and early 90s that was killing gay men in Indianapolis. Many of the gay men were homeless and they were sex workers, many of them. Many of them were highly intoxicated at the point they were picked up. They were picked up at bars. They were picked up at bars that I used to frequent on a regular basis when I used to go out and was in the middle of my drinking addiction and my drug addiction and things like that. And those were people that were very vulnerable that he would pick up. He also tried to find people that he did not think would be searched for, or that a lot of people would be looking for, as far as people that didn't have a lot of ties with their families, or their families had disowned them. One of the things that's important to remember about this case is that these were gay men that were being murdered during the late 80s and 1990s. This was on the heels of the AIDS crisis in the United States. This was when gay men were being persecuted in the United States, especially in a city like Indianapolis, the Bible Belt. I can remember being afraid to walk into gay bars and being afraid. I had friends of mine that were bashed outside of gay bars. This still happens today. But at that point, it was very, very prevalent. And there was fear within the gay community, not just of a serial killer, but just of living your life out loud. It was also a thing where if you had a crime that happened towards you, this was long before hate crimes and things like that, the laws surrounding hate crimes existed, that if something happened to you as a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, happened to you at that time. I had a friend of mine that was a lesbian that was beaten in an alley and was basically told there was no reason to report it, and police were like right around the corner because nothing would happen. That if you reported a lot of this to the police, not much happened. There was not much justice at that time, right? So Herb Baumeister was picking gay men that not a lot of people were going to be looking for, and even if they were, law enforcement wasn't going to take it very seriously at that time. And sadly, I saw a progression for a while in my life, and especially in Indianapolis. I always tell people that Indianapolis feels today like a very safe city to live in as a gay man and as a married gay, couple. But at times, there are very unsafe areas there's a lot of country. When you watch these documentaries where it takes place in a small country town, that is literally what surrounds Indianapolis, are small country towns. And there's a lot of bigotry and a lot of hatred that exists in these small country towns that seeps into the city, and that still exists today. In my last two videos, I indicated that I had a friend of mine that had reached out to me a while ago. He actually reached out to me a year ago. I looked at the date and told me that he had an informant that was involved in the case that came to him at an event that he was at out of state and said to him, would you like to know, I know you're from Indiana, would you like to know more about the Herb Baumeister case? I have information. Now, the information that he told my friend, who I'm going to refer to as my source. There's a source and then there's the informant. I actually asked my friend, I said, do you want like an alias for the video if I did it? Because I did ask him, I said, do you care if I read the text messages? He said no, but I would like if you would change some of the names. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, what I am going to read to you is everything that the informant told him. That doesn't mean that it's true. That doesn't mean that there's any validity to it. I'm just going to tell you. What is interesting about a lot of what he says is that I have heard those things from other people as well. Okay? So there's a lot to these stories that is interesting to me. The other thing is that when he initially contacted me, he told me that his informant's name was, let's just say, A, okay? And I had always been under the assumption that this informant's name was A. And A was just an ambiguous name that didn't really fit into the story. I asked him today while we were texting, because I was asking him if I could share this information. I asked him if, he wanted me to share his name or whatever. He said, you can share my nickname. The reason why I'm not sharing his nickname is because in certain circles of friends of mine, they would know immediately through his nickname of who he was, and I don't want anybody to know who he is until he's ready to come out and share his own story. He did tell me that he would think about sitting down and doing an interview with me at some point, but he's not in Indiana at this point, so that would have to be when he comes back to Indiana. So at some point, we might sit down and do an interview. I also asked him, I said, I'm kind of scared to put this information out there. And he said, well, a lot of the people that are involved in it are gone. They've since passed away. But a lot of the people are still out there. They're older, but they're out there. And he said, you're looking at 2 or 3 people that are in very powerful positions today in the state of Indiana. And he said, and I don't know that they're going to love you kind of bringing all this back up again, and that there's a possibility that they could be implicated in what's going on. I don't know those names, but the people behind the scenes would know those names. He told me some of the names of the people, but I'm not going to share that. He asked me to keep out of the video, obviously his name, but he also asked me to keep out the names of a investigator that he had worked with very, very closely, and some other people involved in the case. And so out of respect for him and his story, I'm going to do that. When he told me the informant's name, when I checked it today, because I said, didn't you tell me that the informant's name was A? And he goes, no, it's B. And I said, no, you said A originally. He did, and he went back up and he read his text. He goes, oh, that was a mistake. And he had told me his first and his last name. So let's just say the first guy's name was A. Smith, okay? And I was like, A. Smith, that doesn't mean anything, right? But when he said it was B. Smith, I was like, oh my God, like this person is riddled throughout the entirety of, everything that you read, everything that you watch, this person's story is out there, right? Which completely gives validity to the story. I was blown away. Now, until I talk to that person directly, which I plan to do at some point, I don't want to come on here and share their story. He may choose to come on video and share his story. I know he's shared many parts of his story before in public forums, so he may choose to come on here if you guys would want to see that. In my video last week, I talked about how I had these text messages implicating that it wasn't her Baumeister that was solely to blame for the killings, that there was actually a group of 6 to 8 very powerful people in Indianapolis. I thought a lot about it, and I thought about whether or not I should just tell you guys the story. Should I read the text messages? Should I reference the text messages? What should I do? And I thought it would maybe be more interesting if I just sat down and I read the text messages to you as they happened. So that's what I plan to do today. And I have to tell you, I started filming this video on the front porch because it's beautiful in Indianapolis today. And of course started saying, you know, that I was afraid to make this video, that I wasn't sure of it, and whatever. And I would get so far in the text messages and dogs would start barking really loud. I would get so far in the text messages and neighbors would come by and start talking to me. And this happens a lot in my videos, but today it happened more than regular, and it's nice, and it has been nice in Indianapolis, but I almost kind of felt like, am I not supposed to be making this video? Like, is there a reason why I shouldn't be sharing these things? A lot of what I'm going to share with you are things that go back a year ago. He originally texted me in February of 2023 about this situation. And then some of the things that I'm going to tell you are conversations that we had today while I was texting him, and last week when I asked him if he was okay with me mentioning it in a video. So let me get into this. Now, I will tell you that because I have to edit out names and I have to edit out some information, it is going to be a little choppy as I go through this. Some of the pieces I will read to you directly, and other pieces I'm going to have to kind of edit as I go. Okay, so he reached out to me in, hold on just a second. He reached out to me, the end of February last year. And he said, hey, is this still Peter's number? And I said, who is this? And he told me who it was and how we knew each other. And I was like, oh yeah, how are you? And he said, yeah, that's me. And he's like, okay, so anyway. And I said, how are you? I said, sorry, just looked you up on Facebook to make sure I was thinking of the right person. He's like, I'm doing great, man, living out. He told me where he was living, and he was living near family. And he said, how about yourself? And I said, doing okay, what's up? And he said, oh, it's all good. I know this is completely random AF. And I said, no problem, what's going on? Is there something I can help you with? And he said, so, super long story, but summed up as succinctly as I can. During an event, so he was at this event in 2016, okay, which really had nothing to do with this whatsoever, and I don't even know how this person, and he never really knew either, because we talked on the phone later, how this person even knew that he was from Indiana, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, it had something to do with him being at this event, being from Indiana, but at that time, he wasn't in Indiana. A person asked me if I would be interested in contacting a third-party source who is involved in the Baumeister case. This source wanted to tell me their story to clear their conscience of their role in the grand scheme of things that took place at Fox Hollow Farms. I took the number, looked into the case, and eventually called the guy. He literally told me that he was listed in the FBI files, admitted to me that he had lied to the feds, which apparently this information has all come out, and this guy has gone to the authorities and told them all this kind of stuff. He told them his involvement with the case, but lied about it, then went back and told them apparently what he knew. But told me that he was a semi-accomplice to the crimes, and then he goes in and explains his relationship to her, Baumeister. The source told me that he had been to the property and could see body pits that the investigation did not uncover. He said they truly had about 40 to 60 victims. And there has been speculation that they have no idea. They said upwards of 40 to 100 victims could have possibly been out there. And that the killings all started as rough sex where onlookers paid to watch at Fox Hollow Farms. He told me there was a team that procured the victims, brought them there, killed them, then cleaned up. He said roughly a team of 6 to 8 people. One of the things that has always been interesting to people is how he could have carried out these crimes, even on a weekend when his wife and children were away, could have cleaned it up, could have killed the men in the pool, brought them out there, killed them, disposed of their bodies, taken them to the burn pile, have the fire go out, all of that. How he could have done that all along, that's one of the reasons why they've always assumed that there could have been an accomplice or a group of people. So he goes on, he says he claims to have evidence, including a note handwritten by Herb just before fleeing to Canada. So Herb Baumeister fled to Canada after they were searching Fox Hollow Farms. He was at a lake house with his son, and he fled to Canada. That was where he eventually took his own life, okay? But now it's being speculated that he didn't, and he was actually killed when he was in Canada. He also had a bag of videotapes, I shared this previously, in the back seat of his car, okay, which are videotapes that supposedly the evidence is on of what was going on at Fox Hollow Farms. A police officer, this is in all the documentaries, a police officer pulled him over the night before he took his own life in Canada. She saw the videotapes in the back seat. She did not search the car or confiscate him, but when they found him, they didn't find any of the videotapes. They assumed they got rid of them. One of the speculations is if there was an accomplice or there were other people involved, they took the videotapes, and that was the reason that Herb Baumeister was killed. And this is what he's referencing here right now. He claims to have evidence, including a note handwritten by Herb just before fleeing to Canada, where he was killed, and the team's snuff tapes recovered by, and this is a person that he refers to as the enforcer, okay, who is at the top of this whole group. He insisted that I record my conversations with him for fear of the enforcer finding him and silencing him. Well, I was just told that they took cadaver dogs out to Fox Hollow Farms. They've had them out there. But for the last year, this is why more information is coming out about the case. Now, for the last year, there have been cadaver dogs out on Fox Hollow Farms on a regular basis. I mean, they are finding stuff all the time. And in fact, if you Google search it, the first thing that comes up, if you search Herb Baumeister, is that January 2024, they're still finding remains out there, still finding bones, and in trying to identify the victims and bring them home to their families. And I found my old dictator, sure as shit. I have 3 audio files with him making these confessions. The details he told me were chilling. And he goes on to talk about the tapes that he has, how many he has, where they are. And I told him that he needed to secure these audio tapes. He informed me that he already had and that they were secured with other people. And that's when I said, could we talk about this on the phone? He said, yeah. And he explained to me when he could. And we ended up talking. And I told him about, my making copies of this as well, and we talked about it, and I also told him that he needed to contact the authorities on this, and he said duly noted, and he explained to me that he had contacted authorities, and he explained to me flash drives and things that he had of backing all this information up and where he talked about it. He talked to me about talking to a law enforcement agency, I'm not going to say from what county, but that what he was told when he brought all this information to him was that, quote, end quote, the FBI isn't in the business of getting those things wrong, was what he was told when he brought this information to law enforcement. And that my source was likely making it up because he wanted money from me to tell his story. Now, what's interesting about this is that this informant has never come out and asked my friend for any money. He's never tried to sell his story to anybody. He's never said anything about it. In fact, he's implicated in the story. So why, by self-implicating himself in the story that he was part of this, as somebody that was very close to Herb Baumeister, that at one point had allegedly been Herb Baumeister's lover, which is why Herb Baumeister's wife supposedly could not stand this man, on and on and on. It implicates him in the case, okay? So why he would be selling his story of implicating himself in a case does not ring true, which is yet again law enforcement wringing their hands of all this. And, in my last 2 videos, people asked me, they said in the comment sections, are you implying or do you believe that law enforcement, that they are somewhat allegedly doing a cover-up, or they did a cover-up at the time? Do you think that that could be possible? I thought 30 years ago it was possible. I thought 5 years ago it was possible. I thought 6 months ago it was possible, and I think now that there definitely was a cover-up and that law enforcement possibly was involved in it, and that's actually part of what he tells me in here. So he goes on to say to me, I said, we could talk more about it. He said, I said, because I'm not sure about that. And he said, but noted that if more evidence ever came out, he talked about this, okay? And he said, but Peter, and this is when I said, did you say the guy's name was? And that's when he said, no, I said it was A, okay? And I said, oh, okay. He said, if my source was not lying, he claims that at the time the county coroner was involved, including others. That's how it got swept under the rug. And that's where he says, no, not A, B, or whatever, name-wise. That's why, and he goes on to talk about all this kind of stuff. And then we're talking about my video that I made, and I said, so I think the possibility of an accomplice was discussed, not to this length, but we do need to talk about this because I have some theories, because at that time we were talking about some theories. He goes, definitely. I'm piecing together more of what he told me. He said, I remember he wanted something about Herb Baumeister's wife, and that he admitted that they knew each other and that she did not like him because he was Herb's boyfriend at the time. He swears that she knew to some extent the planning of what was going on, but maybe after the fact, and was told to take the kids out of town during these times. Now, I've never heard this ever before implicated at all, that the wife knew anything or whatever whatsoever. All I know is that she did not want the police on Fox Hollow Farms investigating until her son was in danger at the lake house, okay? And so he said, like, this would happen. He goes, he talks about what she's doing today, where she's living, and what her job is, and this is what the informant told her. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that I do know what his wife is doing today. I do know where she's living, her assumed name, and all that stuff. And the reason why I know that is because, and I also know things about the children because I know people that know them. Indianapolis is a very small town. And in fact, I think I shared this on my vlog this summer. I was at the pool and we were talking about this case. There was like 5 or 10 people in the pool this one weekend. And this guy was talking about how Herb Baumeister was his daughter's like soccer or softball coach or something. I talked about it in a vlog. I know I did. I remember talking about it. And that we were all talking about this Herb Baumeister case. People talk about this case. People know his wife. This was a prominent family in Indianapolis. She works around here today. People know who she is. People know who his kids are and things like that. It's not like they're secret and they went into hiding, okay? It's not like they're in the Witness Protection Agency or anything, a witness relocation program. Like, people know who they are. They know where they are. They know where they work. They know where they live. It's not a hidden secret in Indianapolis. People know this, right? But there were certain things that he told me that only people that are close to her, because I do know people that are close to her that'll be like, oh, this is what she's doing or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, you know, whatever. I have never heard that she was implicated in it. And I've just, out of respect for her and her children, been like, let her live her life. You know, in covering a lot of true crime situations, people at the time often want to blame the family of the serial killer and things like that. I don't think that's fair. I don't think they deserve that. You know, a lot of people will be like, well, how did the wife not know after all these years? Wives don't know. Serial killers are very good at what they do. That's why they don't get caught for years on end, you know? I've read the books of family members that have written about their relationships. I've seen the interviews, whatever, that a lot of people don't know. I don't think it's fair to blame the family. If it is true that she's implicated in this somehow or that she did know about the planning, she has never come out and spoke about it, at least publicly. Maybe to the police she did. Maybe that was part of the investigation that never knew, but I have never heard of her implication or anything to do with that whatsoever, or that she was told by her Baumeister to leave town. She went out of town a lot. The murders occurred when she would be out of town at the lake house or visiting people. That was when the murders occurred. I don't know, and I've never heard, and I heard from source material, the people that bought the house, that she was at the lake house a lot, but I never heard that her Baumeister told her to go there. So that was new to me. I responded to him and I said, that part about his wife isn't even remotely accurate. I said, Herb fled to Canada after he had their son at the lake house. The daughter was with the mom. The wife finally called the police because she was afraid he would hurt their child. And that's what I've always heard, okay? And then he goes on and says some more things. We talk about being good from hearing each other, and we find out a time to talk and all this kind of stuff. And I also told him to check out John Larden Art's video on Fox Hollow Farms too, because it'll give him a lot of background, because he was going to start looking into this stuff, because he didn't know a lot about the case at that time. And I said, of course. Then he followed up with me like 2 days later. He said, just wanted to let you know that I haven't forgotten about our text. In fact, it's been the opposite. I have multiple notebooks going and I'm scouring the web about the case, namely finding primary sources from the main players. There are all kinds of documents on it, and I am giving each one some attention. That being said, anyone can say anything on the internet, hence why I want the primary sources, because he wanted to go to the primary sources and talk to them. He talked to me about the possibility of, like, researching this behind the scenes. So far, I found, because he got, like, intrigued with this case like I did, okay? It was like when I was watching the Maura Murray case, and the James Renner, that writer of the true crime case, he said, once you start, if you start getting into this, you're not going to be able to get out of this case, right? He said, so far I found 2 amazing resources. The best has actually been interviews with the main players in the case. For example, private investigator that was involved in it, this IPD chief, the attorney of the wife at the time, and somebody of the I-70 killers, this detective that was in charge of the case in Preble County, Ohio, who led the Ohio side of the I-70 murders investigation. So he had found those people and was reaching out to those. Those are all straight from their mouth interviews. The only other major player that I'm looking for is, and he talked to me about Marion County, which is where Indianapolis is. All these murders occurred in Hamilton County. A Marion County police detective who oversaw the missing persons investigations and was the one who kept pressing Hamilton County to take action. So when I explained this last week, what I said was if there was a lot of miscommunication between two counties. Marion County is where Indianapolis is. Hamilton County is where Westfield, Indiana is, which is very close to Carmel, Indiana, which is where his house sat. It sat between it sat between Carmel and Westfield on a secluded road. It's no longer secluded. There's housing developments built all around it now, but the estate still exists, and there's houses on the, like, $1 million homes. There's like 3 of them on the Fox Hollow Farms estate. And it all backs up to this woods, which is Fox Hollow, and goes along the Monn. There's actually a walking path that goes behind it. The Monn Trail stretches from the south side of Indianapolis all the way up to the north side of Indianapolis. It used to be a railroad that is now a walking path that people walk on, they bike on, they run on. It goes all the entire length of Indianapolis to the north and to the south. And it backs up against Fox Hollow Farms. People, when you walk by it, they can actually walk on the Monn path or the Monn Trail, and they can see the back of Fox Hollow Farms, where in the woods where I was at and things like that. So at the time that this was going on, Hamilton County, which is where the murders occurred, Fox Hollow Farms, was dragging their feet on it, okay? Indianapolis, which is where the men that were missing were from, which is Marion County, they were pushing the investigation, but Hamilton County was dragging their feet. Why? We don't know. So he goes on and says, anyways, I should be done with my first wave of research by the upcoming weekend if you would like to plan a time to talk. And we talked about that. And I said, yes. Okay. So we went on and talked about that. He said, you were right when you said this is a really big deal. I found a couple bombshells, Peter. I'm still searching. We'll keep you posted. And this was, we talked a little bit more about this. And he said, I'm trying to read through these. This is where I asked if I could talk about it in a video, and he said this was like a year ago. And he said, yes, you totally have my permission to talk about our combos, just please don't name me. I'm not opposed to going on record. I would just want to get my ducks in a row and be aware ahead of beforehand. And I think this was when, no, this was me just asking him this week is when he said that. And I said, okay, I'm getting ready to post it. And he said, so this is just conversations we just had in the last week. He said, yes, when I spoke, I took 2 months and researched everything I could find about the case. Every documentary with interviews from the original players. As I know, it came from their mouths. Every book on the subject, etc. I even spoke to the private investigator on the record for 2 hours. So many inconsistencies, so many loose ends that weren't tied up but categorized and left to be. One investigator, he talked to several investigators. One investigator verified just about every single question I had after putting the interviews of police files and the source research materials from the books all together with what the survivor told me, which I recorded. One private investigator affirmed there's so much more that was covered up and lied about on the official case files. If you're interested in truly getting into the nitty-gritty of what I've got uncovered, we can coordinate something, he said. This is what my friend said to me. P.S. One of the investigators told me exactly what was lied about and what evidence came up missing, in quotations. He also told me other players to investigate further. And I told him that we would talk and that we would call each other, blah, blah, blah. We're going to arrange for a time. We're going to talk this weekend about him possibly doing an interview. And so I texted him today when I decided that I was going to do this video today. And I said, I'm wondering if you mind if I just read our text and share the information you told me. I can edit out some of the names, of course. But people seem to be interested in this, and I think it's important to keep this story alive. Also, at some point, if you'd like to do an interview like we talked about, I'd love that. Hope you're well. He said, yeah, you can read our text, but please do not name. And he listed several people that he did not want me to name that he had talked to. Several source people that he had talked to. This is going to stop in just a second. Hold on. Okay. So then he said, I promised these people that I would contact them before I ran with anything or named them. You could use these sorts of things. So he goes in, this one person said he never said I couldn't use and run with the info and wasn't even opposed to me using his name for certain aspects, but on others wanted to know and or first wish to remain anonymous, blah, 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 which makes total sense to me. And, okay, okay. And that was actually from a completely different source, because that source did not want to be named for saying individuals involved, including elected officials and the wife. That came from a completely different source that had reached out, that he found, and that reached back at him. So then he goes on, and I said, because this is where I asked, and I said, how does A factor into this story for you? Because I was going through and reading the text. And he said, I'm not sure about A. I only know a B Smith. And everything clicked. And I was like, okay, I said, I won't use these names. When I asked you previously about that name, you said B. Looking back, it makes sense. This is important, I said. And he goes on to talk about this person and how, like, if you find this information on whatever, did I send you the documentary links? He said to me. He goes on and talks about the A&E documentary, which was the one that I originally watched, that interviews her Baumeister's wife, Julie. They are key to this case as they come straight from the people's mouths and raise all kinds of red flags. The other interview that his wife did was with Oprah in the 90s, but it never aired and is unavailable. Her attorney didn't like how she came off and filed a cease and desist order to prevent Oprah from running that episode. Instead of fighting it in court, they just canned it. I think I looked it up once, said it was something like season 17, episode 9, but every lead I followed to find its lead to dead ends. Oprah's company never released it or the uncut tapes. He said, bro, I've got a full notebook covered in notes on each document, book, documentary, all with timestamps and timelines. That A&E Bill Curtis documentary is the best place to start unpacking the loose ends, which was the original documentary that I watched, I believe in 1996 or 97, which got me started on being interested in this space, on all this. I have not watched it in a very long time. What he said next made me want to go back and watch this. I'm going to go back and watch it tonight. He said, especially the last 10 minutes of it. Your jaw will drop when you hear what Julie and this other person say. I don't know who this person was. It was somebody that was involved in the case. And then add in what I've told you was confessed to me by the informant. That I was asked to record. If you are looking to do a super deep dive, I've read every book that is out there on Fox Hollow Farms. The only one I really recommend is Where the Bodies Are Buried by Fanny. I don't know who this person is. Fanny somebody. And tells me about numerous people that sat with this author for the book. He's telling me about how he can get me a copy of this book, and that he can literally tell me, you need to read page 59, paragraph 3, and stuff to tell me where the lies are, that the informant told him that there are lies in this book, and this is where they are. Sorry for all the text. The subject hits home for me. I'm very passionate about it, as I'm sure it does for you, and you are too. And I said, yes, I am. And then he said, I would possibly be up for an interview. I'm not sure about being afraid, because this is when I asked him, I said, yes, I'm extremely passionate about it too, obviously, and I kind of feel like I might, I said that I feel like I might need to talk about this more if people are interested in it. I said, would you ever want to do an interview about this, and do you think I need to be afraid about talking about this? And he said, oh, possibly I'd be up for an interview. I'm not sure about being afraid. The one who killed Herb died about, these are things that were directly told to him from his informant. The one who killed Herb died about 7 to 8 years ago. So that directly indicates from the informant that Herb Baumeister did not take his own life, that he was actually killed. But there's still others. This is the part that is so chilling to me. But there are still others, and this might indicate why the family wants nothing to do with this, never talks about it, refuses to do interviews or anything about it anymore, because maybe to some degree there is something that they know or they don't want out there or whatever. The one who killed Herb died about 7 to 8 years ago, but there's still others who participated in the murders that aren't dead. This was a team affair. That's physically afraid, emotionally. The higher up elected officials may pitch a bitch, depending on what you come out with, and talked about a specific person in here who is still in their position. The big lead people on this case who lied about it have since died of natural causes. But there are others, and he names these other people, that would be willing to talk after so long. And he goes on to name who these people are that were involved in the investigation, that did not lie, that were honest about it, that were fighting people, that were lying, that were keeping cover-ups going on. And talked about this people, and then I told him something that I knew specifically. And he said, he goes in to talk about a family member. So I'm not going to get into all that. I'll share that at another time if more comes out about it. He said to me, "This is such a huge convoluted case with wide-ranging ramifications and implications. Conservative Hamilton County does not want the truth to come out." I was even told that specifically by several investigators. So just know, Hamilton County will drag their feet when it comes to releasing information and will do anything to keep the squeaky clean image of Hamilton County, okay, intact and pure. They don't want to be known for having a large gay community. And two, they definitely don't want to be associated with a killing team that make money by providing in-person snuff. Now, what's interesting about this is that I went to high school at Carmel High School. Carmel High School, at the time that I went there, and supposedly now, is one of the best high schools in the country as far as athletics and academics, best public high schools in the country. Hamilton County is an extremely conservative county with a squeaky clean reputation, okay? So what he is saying aligns, truthfully, with why they would want to keep this off the grid and wouldn't want to be known for, you know, one of the biggest cover-ups in the history of anything to do with organized criminal behavior in the country, let alone in north suburban, wealthy part of Indiana. Okay, we're talking about these crimes occurred on a fenced-in Fox Farm estate, or not Fox Hollow Farms, which was a horse farm estate, okay? With a guest cottage, a house, an in-ground, inside, indoor pool. I mean, you guys, the estate is massive, all right? And there's estates surrounding it that are massive. And so he goes on to say this about, and they definitely don't want to be associated with a killing team that made money by providing in-person snuff. And so I said something about, I watched A&E documentary when it first came out. He said that's what the Fox Hollow Farms was. A killing team that provided in-person BDSM snuff for paying customers. But if you rewatch that A&E documentary with this new information in mind, I will bet it hits differently. First time I saw it years ago, I just took it at face value. But after the confessions and the suggestions I was given by several people that I have talked to, including the informant, so much of it hits differently, especially the inconsistencies and loose threads that could use some tugging. And then he asked me what channel that I'm going to be posting it on, and this is where I asked him what name he wanted to be called, and he went through all these different kinds of things of what he wanted to be called, and I just said, I'm going to call you my source. He said, and thank you for asking me, I really do appreciate about the name saying. He said, I will leave you with a semi-rhetorical question that I was asked by the informant when I first started talking to him. Just how far are you willing to dig and get into the truth of this case? Because the implications are huge. So it's a very scary thing to leave this on. But to have this informant out there and people that are still in powerful positions in Indianapolis that are implying, there are several people now that are implying, not just one, not just the informant, but other people that were involved in the case that my friend has reached out to that are part of law enforcement that have implied that there was a huge cover-up that was done on this case and that it was all for basically paid in-person snuff that was occurring at the time is extremely, extremely scary to think about. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in one of my videos the other day that I did or not, but I remember this movie that came out at the time, and it just, I always keep on going back to this with the Baumeister case. And the movie was called 8mm. It was with Nicolas Cage. We've never seen the movie. It's very dark, but it's fantastically done. And it's about this widow, and her husband dies, and they're extremely wealthy, and she finds this recording, like this videotape or something, in the safe, and it's a snuff film. And she hires Nicolas Cage to look into, was it real or was it faked? And I did mention this in a video recently, and to find out, and the lengths and the dark places that he has to go to find out the truth behind this story, and behind what happened, is unbelievable when you watch this movie, and it's very, very scary. You know, is this the story of a lone serial killer that, let alone, killed 25, upwards 30, 40 gay men, most of which have never been identified, and now the story is about bringing the victims home to their families and having them be identified so that their stories are never lost? That alone, I think, is enough, don't you, to continue to tell the story. But if in fact this was a large group that was doing this, okay, and that people lost their lives for the pleasure of others, the implications of how sick and how deep that goes, the people that were involved in it to cover it up, and where that goes, not only, and I am not God, but I do feel that maybe those people deserve to burn in hell, but also the truth deserves to be exposed. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. If you're more interested in hearing more about this case, I will continue to talk about it. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.